Hello to a Night at the Tavern's audience in San Gonzalo, Brazil. I'm David Stuart, Jan Kerouac's half-brother. I'm going to be reading tonight from Trainsong, her second book, chapter 23, where she returns from Hollywood to Ellensburg, Washington, right in the center of Washington State, after her time in Hollywood. October of '78 saw me packing up again, just as these star-studded hills were threatening to absorb me. 16 months was a long time for me to stay in any one place. Something in my shaky DNA usually compelled me to leave places sooner, in keeping with a childhood peppered with evictions and upheavals of all sorts. After the amnesia on the set of Heartbeat, I had begun to work as an extra all over LA, calling a magic number every morning to find out where the films were being shot that day. Stars were fairly twinkling out of the woodwork that fall, inviting me to parties at Art Deco mansions that looked more like yachts. But something was missing. I had to see my mother. On a bus again, going north this time, I suddenly remembered why I'd vowed never to go by bus ever again. But it was too late. In many crummy cafes, truck stops, and depots, I barely preserved my sanity by scribbling on napkins. Where was I going now? All at once, my life appeared before me as a worthless string of pilgrimages, here, there, anywhere. Was it true what an old lover had said, that I was running away from something? But what was wrong with running to things? Sure, I was running to my mother. And what are mothers for if not to run to when a soul feels forsaken and misunderstood by the entire world? The road whizzed endlessly by molecule, tar blob after gravel speck, after pebble, after atom of yellow paint. I watched this dizzying procession from the greasy window and suddenly felt very alone. I thought of how a map of the world, this country in particular, would look if one were to draw red lines where I'd been. It would look like an airline flight pattern. You'd hardly be able to make out the towns. Why? Could it really be my father's blood? How thoughtful of him to bequeath me this restless blood, never bothering to tell me how it works. He might have at least included an owner's manual. A rubber band tightened in my chest, eliciting tears from tired eyes. But I couldn't cry now. The weirdo across the aisle was watching, waiting for some sign of vulnerability to prey on. An infinity of muggy, stuffy seconds passed slowly, but once passed, they were gone as gone could be. I stood on the faded red porch of 605½ North Ruby Street in Ellensburg, Washington, bags set down, admiring the light bulb and the snow shovel and the flimsy screen door, with the awe-filled scrutiny of a time traveler. I pressed the rusty bell and listened with delight as it buzzed deep in the recesses of the house, arousing my unsuspecting mother. "Who is it?" her eternally girlish voice rang out. "Fuller Brushman," I bellowed in my best Ralph Cramdenese, but that didn't fool her. "David, your sister's back." I could hear her yelling excitedly as she descended the stairs. "Which one?" came the gruff reply. "Oh, the big one. I mean the little one. I mean your oldest sister who is the littlest." My mother was all flustered and harebrained. I loved to see her that way. "Well, let's see. I think so, but you can't be too sure about these things." I hugged her and felt her sharp shoulder bones padded by the red sweatshirt. "Hey, you guys are really coming up in the world. Staircases and everything. Whatever happened to the shack out in Kittitas?" "Oh, Jan, there's so much to tell you. This calls for a new pot of coffee. See, I still have the same blue pot you gave me. Now, you mustn't call it a shack. It was a house. Yes, it was. The whole lot's been bulldozed. Is your book done yet?" "No, almost, but I was in a movie, and I met Sissy Spacek. Hey, David, I've got something for you. More foreign coins?" Guess again. I pulled a lavender plastic bag out of thin air. "Fredericks of Hollywood?" they read aghast, and out of that came a genuine fig leaf from Sycamore Avenue, complete with 2 fresh figs. "Well, I've heard of crotchless panties, but this beats all," said my mother as David blushed and held it up to himself. "Well, I guess I'll have to go try them on." It took all of 3 days to bring one another abreast of the events of the past 3 years, and then we got down to the business of Thanksgiving, compliments of the dumpster. One brisk November evening, David gleefully took me to see the treasure trove next door, a mammoth bin of supermarket rejects, constantly replenished with everything from foil-wrapped pots of live chrysanthemums to whole boxes of perfectly virgin Chiquita bananas to loads of half-pint cartons of whipping cream that weren't even past pull date. We got into the habit of climbing up the garbage-smeared rings every night. This was the high point of the day. With inevitable stifled whoops of delight, we'd dive in and quickly gather our forbidden harvest in used boxes and crates to scramble out, hands frozen, breath huffing in icy plumes, and hurry the mere half-block back to Ruby Street with wondrous booty to dump at our mother's feet. The staircase was already lined with multicolored pots of chrysanthemums, one to each step. And on the night we came home with the cream, a new pastime was born. Neither David nor I had any idea what we should do with all the little cartons. How could we possibly stomach such a quantity of whipped cream before it went bad? But my mother knew best. And with a fiendish glow in her eyes, she declared, butter. So for the next week, all we did, it seemed, was fill mason jars with cream and shake them manually. While talking or watching TV, even while soaking in the bathtub, each of us had to have a jar in hand. It was like a cause. We were the butter underground. Shaking the jar full of cream was kind of boring for a few minutes, but then, almost imperceptibly, a change would take place. The monotonous sloshing would stop, and you'd have a jar of whipped cream in your hands, all opaque and mysterious, of even weight. If you shook it really vigorously for a few more seconds, breaks would begin to appear in the cream, and then came a high-pitched sloshing. Before you knew it, a big ball of pure butter was thudding back and forth in a pool of milk. It was a rewarding process, and pretty soon we had amassed a freezer full of 1-pound blocks of sweet butter, enough for all the holiday baking, plus the surprise byproduct of several gallons of lovely milk. All this time, David had been racking his brains to figure out the easiest way to make our alchemical magic. One snowy afternoon, he tied one of the jars inside a box, then tied the box to the ornate iron treadle of our mother's old Singer sewing machine, and sat there, treadling away, churning butter with his foot. He couldn't resist the temptation to say, "Look, Ma, no hands." Thank you so much for having me. I hope you enjoyed this, and I appreciate all your remembrances of Jan. Have a good night.